If someone were to offer you a 100% guarantee, would you take it?
Yeah.
The answer is, that depends. That's the answer. I hope that's the answer anyway. 100% guarantee. Have you ever ordered a pizza and they guaranteed it to your door within 30 minutes? Do you order stuff online? Primarily, I'm thinking Amazon Prime. Who is a member of Amazon Prime? Okay, a lot of people. Okay, if you're not familiar with Amazon Prime, most goods or products that you order through Amazon Prime will arrive at your door within 48 hours. How about eBay? You ever order anything on eBay? And some merchants on eBay will guarantee a certain delivery time. I once ordered a part for my car from Taiwan, and they guaranteed delivery within 48 hours. And within 2 days, that part was at my front door. I have no idea how they could do that. Taiwan, Halifax, Nova Scotia, 48 hours. But the part was at our doorstep. Is anyone familiar with Darn Tough socks? Anyone wear Darn Tough socks? I can't be the only one. yeah. And my wife and son. Darn Tough socks. This is on their website. I don't know if you're familiar with Darn Tough socks. But Darn Tough socks says on their website, our unconditional lifetime guarantee is simple, without strings or conditions. If our socks are not the most comfortable, durable, and best-fitting socks that you have ever owned, return them and we will send you a new pair. Okay? Now, we have many pairs of Darn Tough socks in our house. We hang out with lots of people who wear Darn Tough socks because we like to hike and walk and camp. I would bet you 75% of all the people we hang out with wear Darn Tough socks. That's all we wear. Darn Tough is darn serious about their guarantee. No? I mean, if you have any issue with their socks, return them, and they will send you another pair. You can have their socks for 10 years. If you don't like them, send them to them. They'll replace them. No questions asked. It's as simple as that. That's what they say on their website. Guaranteed. No conditions, no questions asked. You return them, we send you a new pair. So I will ask you again, if anyone offered you a 100% guarantee, would you take it? What if the guarantee was that you would suffer in your lifetime because you lived a certain way? For instance, if you were a follower of Christ or a witness of Jesus. In our second reading, Peter writes to the early Christians who were being persecuted for their faith. He reminds them that in their suffering there is grace. He says, "Beloved, if you endure when you do right, if you live the life that God calls you to live, if you are a witness to Christ, if you are faithful to Him and suffer for it, you have God's approval. For it is to this that you are called." We are all called by Christ to follow Him. Because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you should follow in His steps. Those steps are difficult. I appreciate that. We all appreciate that. And I would hope, to be honest, that if we're doing it right, there is suffering in who we are as Christians and what we stand for, what we believe in. I lost a job because I refused to compromise my faith. I have lost friendships over what I believe. But honestly, I think we have it pretty easy. Because Peter, in our reading this morning, is reading to people who are truly persecuted. for following Jesus. I don't know if you've ever, he was writing at around 75 AD, and the early Christians were indeed being persecuted. To give you an idea of how dangerous it was to follow Jesus in the time that Peter writes this passage, this scripture, there was a delightful man called Nero. Nero, Claudius Caesar, Augustus, Germanicus. And what he used to do so he was the Roman ruler at the time. He was the emperor. And what he used to do for two Christians was he would take pine oil and wax, other inflammable items, and he would coat them in it. Then he would put them on a pole and light their feet on fire. The Christians suffered under Nero, and they became known as Roman candles. If you've ever ordered fireworks, there are things actually in fireworks called Roman candles. That's where this comes from. The other thing that Nero liked to do was he would put animal skins on Christians and send them out into the arena. And then he would release lions or dogs or wild boars, anything at all. And the Christians would obviously be killed. So early Christians suffered for their faith, and many of them were martyred. But when it comes to guarantees, Jesus offers you 3 guarantees. One is that you're going to suffer for your faith. Jesus says, in John's Gospel, he says, if they persecuted me, they will persecute you. They will do all these things to you on account of my name. A life lived for Jesus is not easy, but it is right. It is just, but not glamorous. Jesus warns us that to follow him will involve persecution and punishment. So Jesus guarantees you will suffer for your faith. Number 2 is he guarantees that he is with you in his suffering. Jesus, before he left the earth, says, I will not abandon you. I will be with you. I will not leave you orphan, and I am coming to you. He will return. We know that. Jesus never abandons us in our suffering, in the persecution that we experience for our faith. And number 3, your suffering will not be in vain. Jesus guarantees you that. No suffering is ever in vain. Your personal suffering has meaning. It has purpose. We may not always like the purpose. We may not always understand the purpose. But it does have meaning and purpose. We have to trust that God will use it for good. In the book of Romans, there's one line in chapter 8, it's one of my most favorite lines in all of Scripture. Romans 8:28 says, we know that all things work together for good, for those who love God and for those who are called to his purpose. All things. Persecution, suffering, frustration. Whatever we experience for our faith, there is purpose behind it. And God will use it for good. We have to trust that. All things work together for good, including suffering. We are called to be imitators of Christ. And even though we know that he was an innocent victim, he endured the suffering because it brought on a greater good. That greater good was your salvation, my salvation, the whole salvation of the world. And as we suffer, we know that our suffering can be used for good. I'm sure you can think of many people who, in their suffering, inspire you because of their suffering. One of the people that I most admire because it was within his suffering you really saw a man who was completely obedient to God. That was Pope John Paul II. Not only did he survive a couple of assassination attempts, one which you probably know almost took his life. He had a number of cancer scares. He had other health issues, but in his 70s, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And in 2005, he needed to have a tracheotomy to help him with his breathing. This picture was taken on Palm Sunday in 2005, a couple of weeks before he passed away. This was one of his last public appearances. And I don't know if you've ever seen this. If it's on YouTube, go check it out. It's a couple of minutes. Pope John Paul is wheeled to the window, and he blesses the crowd below him, and they're all cheering. And it's such a moving moment. He has the palm branches, and he blesses them, and he tries to speak. And so one of his aides brings the mic over, and he leans towards it, and he can't say anything. And so the mic goes away, and he starts, I still get emotional about it, he starts pounding the wheelchair arm. Like he's just so frustrated that he just wants to speak to the people, and yet he can't. So the mic comes back a second time, and he tries again, and he doesn't have any success. And then they pull him away from the window. I mean, we know that Saint Pope John Paul was such an imitator of Christ. He was an inspiration and continues to be through his witness, through his suffering, and through his absolute surrender and obedience to God. He embraced the suffering that God gave to him. And he gave his life in absolute surrender and in obedience. So our message today is that Jesus offers us a 100% guarantee, a guarantee that we will suffer for our faith. What we need to consider is, are we willing to take it?